You don't move to Japan to marry a criminal. You moved to Japan because you're 26 and your therapist back in Portland said you needed a change of environment, and what you heard was, leave the country. You've Gotan art history degree that approximately no one asked for. A studio apartment with bathroom tile situation your landlord calls vintage and everyone else calls mold. A string of relationships so unimpressive your friends stopped setting you up and started suggesting apps, then podcasts, then therapy, and then, finally, Japan. The pottery journalist, the one who meditated aggressively, the one who said he loved you on a first date and meant it as a warning. Your mom asks if you've thought this through. You have not. You have a 6-month cultural exchange visa, a portfolio of paintings nobody bought, a one-way ticket to Narita, and the deeply unearned confidence of a woman who has watched too many documentaries about people who reinvented themselves in foreign countries. The plan, if you can call it that, is stay at an artist residency in Kyoto for 6 months, make enough work for a real show, find yourself, go home changed. You are not looking for anything permanent. Permanent is a word for people who have figured out who they are, and you are still on that question with no estimated time of completion. You land in Osaka with $1,800, 2 suitcases that are mostly art supplies and 1 pair of good shoes, and jet lag so aggressive it feels like a personal attack from the universe. Your first wikie's a blur of wrong train lines, raw fish you ordered by accident and ate anyway, and the slow realization that the Japan you imagined from your studio in Portland and the Japan you are physically standing inside are 2 completely different countries. The one in your head was quiet and meditative. The one you're in has 7 million people in it, and every single one of them knows exactly where they're going. You find your footing in Kyoto. The residency is in Nishiki, a narrow alley city within a city, where the buildings are so close together that 2 people walking toward each other have to turn sideways. You have a studio on the 2nd floor of a Machiya townhouse, with a sliding paper door and a window that faces a garden nobody seems to own but everyone seems to tend. You paint every day. You eat from the market stalls below. You learn to say sorry in Japanese because you say it approximately 40 times a day. The art is good. Better than Portland good. There's something about the light here, the way it arrives and leaves without apology, that does something to the paintings. You are making the best work of your life, and you are also deeply, completely, professionally alone. That changes in November. You are sketching the torii gates at Fushimi Inari on a Tuesday morning when it starts to rain.
Not the Portland rain.
A serious rain. A rain that has paperwork. You duck under the nearest overhang and nearly walk into a man who is already standing there. He is wearing a dark kimono under a very good coat. He is reading a folded piece of paper with the focused attention of a man who has never been interrupted and does not expect to be now. He is somewhere between 35 and 45. His face is angular.
Still.
The kind of still that is not relaxation. It's control. There is a long scar on the back of his left hand that runs from his pinky knuckle to his wrist. You notice it because you are an artist and you notice everything. You do not ask about it. What you do is take out your sketchbook and sketch the rain, because that is less embarrassing than standing next to a handsome stranger, saying nothing. He looks at your sketch without asking if he can look at it. He says in Japanese, "The lines are honest." You say in English, because your Japanese is 4 weeks old, "Thank you." He switches to English. It is formal, exact. Each sentence constructed with the care of a man who learned the language correctly from the beginning rather than picking it up from television. He says, "You're drawing the rain the way it actually looks, not the way it looks in photographs." You say, "Most people draw what they remember, not what they see." He looks at you for a long moment. Then he looks at the rain. Then he looks back at you. Something changes in the arrangement of his expression, not much, not dramatically, but you notice it because you are an artist, and you notice everything. He says, "Yes, most people do." The rain lasts 40 minutes. You talk for most of them. His name is Tekashi. He is from Osaka. He is in Kyoto for business. When you ask what kind of business, he says, various interests, and moves the conversation forward in a way that is so smooth you didn't realize the question has been sidestepped until you're already talking about something else. You will learn later that this is a skill he has practiced longer than you have been drawing. He asks to see more of your work. You give him your studio address because you have never been good at being cautious. He writes it down in a small leather notebook with a fountain pen that probably costs more than your rent. He comes to the studio on Friday with no warning and excellent sake. He looks at every painting in the room.
Slowly.
Without commentary. The way someone reads rather than schemes. You watch him look at your work with the specific anxiety of a person who has offered a stranger access to their interior and is waiting to find out what they'll do with it. He stands for a long time in front of the largest one. A painting of the Nishiki market at dusk, the stalls packing up, light pulling back from the lanterns. He says, "You paint the moment after the moment. Not what happens, but what remains when it's over." You sit down on the floor because your legs go slightly unreliable. Nobody has ever said that about your work, but it is precisely what you have been trying to do for 3 years without knowing the name for it. You say, "That's the most accurate thing anyone has ever said about my paintings." He says, "I pay attention to what things actually are,
Not what I want them to be.
You think about this for a long time after he leaves. You think about it while you are trying to sleep and failing. You think about it over breakfast. You think about it while you are painting, and the painting gets better because of it. The man is dangerous in a way you cannot name yet, and you have just opened the door and waved him through it. You do not know yet what walks through that door with him, but you will. He begins appearing. Not constantly, not suffocatingly. That is not his method. He appears on the right days. The day your residency coordinator tells you the show has been canceled due to funding, he calls. You still don't know how he got your number, and says, "I'm at a restaurant in Gyeon. The food is worth being disappointed near." You go because you are very disappointed and also slightly hungry and also, honestly, because you want to see him again and have been pretending not to. The restaurant is the size of a closet and has no menu. The chef's name is Hiroshi. Andy has been cooking kaiseki for 40 years, and he knows Tekashi by a respectful nod that is longer than a normal nod. Nobody asks what you want. The food arrives, course after course. Each one so precisely constructed that eating it feels like reading something. You eat octopus with your eyes closed because that's apparently what good octopus requires. Tekashi watches you eat with an expression you will spend months trying to paint and failing. It is not a man watching a woman. It is a man watching something is trying to understand. He says, "Why Portland?" You say, "I grew up there." He says, "That's not what I asked." And you tell him things. Things about the apartment and the degree and the gallery that kept almost accepting your work and the relationships that kept almost becoming something. You tell him more than you plan to because his attention is so precise and so complete that it makes you want to fill it. Nobody in your life has ever listened the way this man listens. Not casually. Not multitasking. He listens the way he looked at your paintings. Like something worth understanding. He does not offer his equivalent. Not yet. He says, "What would you stay for?" You think for a long time. Then you say, "A reason I couldn't talk myself out of." He nods. He does not say anything else about it.
He pours your tea.
The conversation moves, but the question stays in the room. You feel it for days afterward, like a bruise you keep pressing. What you know about him at this point. He is from Osaka. He has money that has no obvious source. He has a small scar on his left hand and larger ones you haven't seen. He knows every serious restaurant in Kansai by the owner's first name. He speaks English and Mandarin and possibly one other language he hasn't mentioned. He has never once reached for his phone in your presence. And he looks at you with the sustained attention off a man who has decided you are worth understanding. What you do not know. Everything else. Which is, as it turns out, quite a lot. You extend your visa. You tell your mom it's for the art. It is partially for the art. He takes you to a no performance in Osaka. You understand approximately none of it, and he translates not the plot but the architecture of it. What the masks are doing, what the silences mean, what the audience is supposed to feel when a performer stands completely still for 30 seconds. In No, he says, the most powerful moment is Theon where nothing moves. Because you know something has already happened that cannot be taken back. You watch the motionless performer and feel something shift inside you that you will later recognize as the beginning of being in love with a man you do not yet fully know. You go home and paint for 6 hours straight and don't sleep until 4 a.m. He walks you through the philosopher's path in late January, the canal frozen at the edges, the cherry trees bare. He tells you about Kyoto the way your guidebooks never did. Not the temples, not the seasons, but the human geography. The family that has sold the same tofu on the same corner for 200 years. The woodworker in Arashimaho's hands carries 60 years of oak and cedar. The man at the Nishiki market who lost 2 sons and has been there every day since, because what else do you do when you have nothing left but the thing you know how to do?
You love the city, you say.
I owe this country something, he says.
You do not ask what.
He does not explain what. But the weight of the sentence stays with you for a very long time. On a Saturday in March, you are working late in the studio when the power goes out in the building. You sit in the dark and call him, not because you need help, but because it is the first person you think of, which is, in retrospect, the answer to the question asked in Gion. He arrives in 20 minutes with a torch, a very good bottle of sake, and the information that the power won't be back until morning. You sit in the studio in the lamplight. He tells you about his father, a dock worker in Kobe, a man who worked so hard and so honestly that the city swallowed him completely and gave nothing back. He tells you he decided very young that the city would owe him before he was done with it. He says this quietly. He is not bragging. He is explaining. There is a difference, and you hear it. You ask, "What did you do to collect?" He looks at you for a long time. Then he says, "I did what I had to do, and I am still doing it." It is not an answer. It is also not a lie. You will understand this later. You accept it because the lamplight is warm and the sake is excellent, and you are halfway in love with him already, and the part of you that should be alarmed has apparently taken the evening off. What you understand in this moment. This man is not ordinary. What you do not understand yet, the specific nature of his extraordinariness. He asks you to stay in Japan, not move in with him, not marry him.
Stay.
A distinction that turns out to be characteristic of the way he operates. He never overreaches. He asks for exactly as much as the moment can hold and waits for you to give it. You say yes because the art is extraordinary and the man is extraordinary, and Portland is a very long way away, and you have never once made the safe choice, and it has never cost you this much yet. 3 months later, one of his men waits for you outside the studio with a car. He says Mr. Tekashi would like you to join him for dinner. The car is long and black and very clean. There are 2 other men in the front. And for the first time since November, the word dangerous lands somewhere in your chest and stays there. The dinner is at his home in Osaka. You have been to dinner at his home before. But this dinner is different before you walk in. You can feel the difference in the temperature of the hallway. 3 men you have never seen stand at points in the entryway like furniture that has learned to watch. Tekashi is at the table in a gray kimono. The table has 12 places set. 11 of them are already occupied by men you have never met, all of them in formal dress, aloft them with the particular posture of men who are used to rooms where posture is political. They look at you the way you are looked at when you have walked into the wrong room at a party. Except this is not a party. You understand this immediately and completely, without anyone telling you. Tekashi stands when you enter. The room follows him in standing. 12 men standing because he stood. You file this away.
He seats you to his right.
After dinner, when the others have gone, he pours sake and sits across from you at the empty table and tells you, not everything, not immediately. He tells you the architecture first. The Tekashi, a Yakuza organization operating out of Osaka, Kyoto, and Kobe. Real estate, construction, certain entertainment industries. He has led it for 7 years. His father's brother built it. Tekashi rebuilt it from near collapse after a rival syndicate tried to fracture it a decade ago. He is the Oyabun, the top of it. He tells you this with the same precision and calm with which he translated no, not performing, explaining. You do not say anything for a very long time. You think about the car with the 2 men in the front. You think about the restaurant owner in Gion and the nod that was too respectful. You think about the sake he brought to the studio and the way he never reaches for his phone. You think about all the things you noticed and filed away and did not examine because you were busy being in love with a man who looked at your paintings like they deserved looking at. Then you say, "How many people know what you are?" He says, "Everyone who needs to." Then you say, "How many people have you hurt?" He is quiet for a moment. He says, Some. Then, I have not hurt people who were not part of this life. Then, that is not an absolution.
It is just a fact.
You say, I need to go home. He nods. He calls the car. He does not try to stop you or reassure you or explain more than you asked for. He lets you leave with full information and no pressure, and that you will realize at 3 a.m. in your studio staring at the painting of Nishiki Market is itself a kind of violence, because it gives you nothing to push against. You cannot reject a man who is honest. You can only decide what to do with the truth. You stay awake until dawn. You think about Portland and the degree and the gallery and the almost relationships. You think about the painting that is the best thing you have ever made. You think about the philosopher's path and the man who owed the country something and the dockworker father who gave everything and got nothing back. You think about the dinner table and 12 men standing because one man stood. And then you think, I am going to make the worst decision of my life. You call him at 6 a.m. He answers on the second ring, because of course he does. You say, I'm not leaving Japan. He says, I know. He says it without triumph, without relief. He says it the way you state a thing that was always going to be true. That makes it worse. And also better. You sit with both. Getting engaged to a Yakuza boss is not a Hallmark movie. It is a conversation at his kitchen table in which he tells you what it will mean. Not romantically, architecturally. Your movements will be monitored for your safety. There will be men near you when he is not. His enemies are not abstractions. They are specific people with specific motivations, and they will consider you a leverage point once you are publicly his. Your identity as an American artist will be both your protection and your exposure. Foreign nationals have diplomatic standing. That standing is a partial shield, but shields have edges. He says, I will not ask you to be something you aren't, but you will need to understand the geometry of this. You say, give me a map. He almost smiles. He proposes in the studio, not with theater. He sits across from you at the paint-smear table with a small box and says, I want you to have a reason you can't argue yourself out of. You recognize your own words from the restaurant in Gion. He remembered them. He has been carrying them for months. The ring is extraordinary. You say yes before you know what your mouth is doing. Then you sit there for a minute and say, I need you to know I'm terrified. He says, good. Unafraid people make careless decisions. You laugh. The laugh surprises you. It is the laugh of someone who has just done something enormous and is still alive. The wedding is held at a private estate in Kyoto's Higashiyama district on the hillside above the temple quarter. Late April. The cherry blossoms are exactly right, like someone ordered them. Your mother flies in. She is the bravest person at the ceremony and does not know it. She walks through a room with 45 Yakuza men in formal Haori jackets and asks the nearest one if there's a bathroom. He directs her politely. She later tells you he was very helpful. You do not explain the context. The ceremony is Shinto, conducted by a priest who moves with the specific gravity of a man performing rites that have been performed for 1,000 years. You wear Ashuramuku bridal kimono, white, layered, with its Tsunokakashi hood, the traditional horn hiding cloth that, your mother-in-law tells you afterward, is meant to hide the horns of jealousy and selfishness that all brides carry. You think, if she only knew which woman in this room they should actually worry about. You look across the ceremony and Tekashi is watching you with an expression that is the most unguarded thing you have ever seen on his face. A man who has always looked at you like a painting he is trying to understand is looking at you now like someone who has decided to stop analyzing and just stand in the room with it. Your mother cries from the beginning. His men bow to you for the first time as a collective after the ceremony, a precise, formal bow that lasts exactly 2 seconds. You understand in that moment what has just changed. You are no longer the American artist who comes to dinner. You are the Oyabun's wife. The geometry of your life just got significantly larger and significantly more dangerous. You go to Hakone for the honeymoon. 4 days in a ryokan overlooking Mount Fuji. 2 of his men are in the adjacent room, and this, you learn, is simply a fact of your life now. You stop noticing them by day 3. Tekashi is different here. Not a different person, but a different version. The version that exists when the responsibilities are in another prefecture. He wakes early and watches the mountain change color as the light moves across it. He cooks breakfast because there is a small kitchen and he wants to. He asks about Portland, about the degree, about the paintings before Japan. He listens like he always listens, completely without division. You tell him things you have never told anyone. He tells you things in return. Not secrets of the organization. Secrets of himself. The father he couldn't save from the exhaustion of an honest life. The boy who decided the world owed a debt and went about collecting it by the only means available. A young man from Kobe docks with no connections and too much intelligence for the options on offer. He says, I don't believe I'm a good man, but I believe I'm an honest one, which is rarer. You lie there listening to this and understanding that you have married someone who contains a contradiction so complete that understanding it will take the rest of your life. You decide that is enough. For now, it is enough. You move into his residence in the hills above Higashiyama. The house is traditional and extraordinary. Tatami rooms, a garden designed in the Edo period, a koi pond soothe the fish are almost mythological. There are cameras at every entrance. 2 men at the gate. A housekeeper named Keiko who has worked for the household for 20 years and accepts you with the neutrality of a woman who has seen several previous attempts and is reserving judgment. She teaches you things without being asked. How to arrange the rooms. How to greet the specific guests who require specific treatment. The language of the household that is older than any of its current residents. You absorb everything. You paint every day in a studio he had prepared for you in the East Wing, with northern light that changes the work again. The paintings get darker, richer. You paint the garden at dusk, the koi moving through black water. You paint the gate. You paint men standing in rooms. You paint the mountain from a window. The work is extraordinary and you know it, and it frightens you because you understand you are not painting Japan anymore. You are painting the life you are inside. The life has rules. You learn them the way you learned the household, by absorption, by watching, by asking Keiko when you don't understand, and never asking the men at the gate. There are things you do not ask about. Not because you are forbidden, but because you understand quickly that asking is itself a kind of burden placing, that demanding to know the details of his work is demanding that he either lie to you or make you complicit in something you chose not to be complicit in. You have the art. You have the life of the house. You have the compound, which is beautiful and strange and contains almost everything you need. You also have the thing you didn't expect. His time. Tekashi, it turns out, is a man who compartmentalizes with surgical precision. When he's at work, he is at work. When he is home, he is home. He does not bring it through the door. He leaves it at the gate with the 2 men who stand there. This means that the hours you have with him are genuinely his hours. He is present the way almost noon you have ever known has been present. He asks about the paintings. He reads what you read. On Sunday evenings he teaches you Go and loses to you by month, for which delights you enormously and bothers him not at all. He says losing to you is instructive. You suspect this means he is letting you win. He denies it. The evidence is inconclusive. You build a life inside the life. You have a show, your first real show, at a private gallery in Osaka. He arranges it without telling you. You find out when Keiko mentions the invitations being printed. You confront him in the kitchen and he looks up from his newspaper and says, "You needed the wall space. I have the connections." This seemed efficient. The show is extraordinary. Critics come. Collectors come. A curator from Tokyo comes and spends 45 minutes with the painting of the koi pond. Your work sells. More than sells, you become, quietly and specifically, one of the most discussed young foreign artists working in Japan. You do not know how much of this is your talent and how much is the shadow of who your husband is. You decide it doesn't matter because the paintings are real. The rest is logistics. The syndicate wives meet you formally at a dinner in Kobe. 6 women of varying ages from various Yakuza families. They have had other versions of your life, and they have learned things from it. The oldest one, a woman in her 70s named Hamiko, sits next to you and says, "You will spend years trying to understand the difference between what he does and who he is. One day you will realize they are the same thing. That day, decide if you can love the whole of it." She refills your sake and changes the subject. You will think about this sentence for years. What you see and what you don't see. There are moments. A conversation cut short when you enter a room. A phone call that requires him to stand and walk to the garden. The way certain men greet him, not the organized respect of a business, but the specific deference of people who are afraid and grateful in equal measure. You see a man leave his office once with a cut above his eyebrow that wasn't there an hour before. You don't ask. There are days when he comes home and the quietness in him is a different quality off quiet from the Sunday evening quiet. It is the quiet of a man who has done something and is putting it down in the hallway with the work. You learn to read the difference. You never ask what you're reading. You paint these days too. Not literally, but they are in the paintings. The weight off withheld information. The beauty of a life conducted near violence, without being consumed by it. The specific loneliness of loving a man who contains rooms you will never enter. You are 3 years into the marriage when the trouble starts. Not from outside. From inside. A lieutenant named Noguchi, who has been with the organization for 15 years, begins positioning himself. You don't know this at first as politics. You know it as a change in how he addresses you at dinners. The bow is fractionally shorter. The eye contact a beat longer than deference. Tekashi notices. He says nothing to you. He says something to Noguchi in private that you learn about obliquely from Keiko, who mentions that there will be a senior meeting this week. The week is very tense in the house. You paint through all of it. Then something happens that you are not supposed to see and see anyway. You come back early from a gallery opening in Kyoto on a Tuesday. The car drops you at the gate. One of the men says something into his radio, but you are already through the garden and into the east corridor before anything can be arranged, and you see, through the rice paper screen of the receiving room, the shapes of 3 men and the particular quality of the silence that comes after something has already occurred. You keep walking. You go to the studio. You close the door. You sit at the window with the northern light, and you do not paint for a very long time. When Tekashi comes to find you at midnight, you are still sitting at the window. He sits across from you. He looks at you. He says nothing. You say, "I know what I married." He says, "Yes." You say, "I don't want the details. I want you to understand that I know." He says, "I understand." Then you say, and this is the sentence that costs you something that doesn't grow back exactly the same shape. You say, "I need to know if we are safe."
Not me. We.
This house. These people in it. He says, "Yes." You say, "Is that a real yes or a management yes?" He looks at you for a long moment, and then he does something he almost never does. He reaches across the table and puts his hand over yours. The scar on his left hand is under your palm, and you feel it and you think of the rain at Fushimi Inari, and the man reading a piece of paper, and the 40 minutes you spent talking about how people draw what they remember instead of what they see. He says, "It is the realest yes I know how to give." You sit there for a long time, both of you, in the Northern Light studio at midnight. Then you say, "All right." Not because you are at peace. Because you are in love, and peace and love are not always the same geography. The Noguchi problem resolves.
You do not know how, and you do not ask.
But the next senior dinner has a different atmosphere and 1 fewer man at the table, and the bow you receive from the room is slightly longer than usual, which you understand to mean something about the hierarchy having been clarified. You paint what you feel for 6 months. The results are extraordinary and frightening, and the Tokyo curator offers you a solo show at a major gallery, and you accept. The show is called The View from Inside. The press calls it one of the most significant exhibitions of the year. One review describes the work as depicting the interior life of a woman living inside a beauty she understands to be partially constructed from violence. Nobody knows how accurate that is. Tekashi reads the review in the garden. He says nothing about the violence part. He says, "I told you the wall space would be worth it."
You throw a persimmon at him. He catches it. He is faster than you expect.
He should not, at this point, still be surprising you. He still surprises you. The pregnancy is not planned. You tell him on a Sunday morning in the garden. You are both standing by the koi pond and you say, "I'm pregnant." He becomes very still. Not the controlled stillness of Theoyabun. The stunned stillness of a man whose system does not have an immediate protocol for joy. He turns and looks at you, and his face does something you have seen exactly once before, at the wedding, when he looked at you like a man who had decided to stop analyzing and just stand in the room with something. He looks at you now like that. Then he sits down on the stone bench beside the koi pond with the deliberateness of a man sitting down because his legs have made an executive decision. He says, "Are you all right?" You say, "I've been nauseous for 3 weeks." He says, "I meant overall." You sit beside him. You watch the koi. You say, "I think so."
I don't know yet.
He takes your hand, the scar under his fingers. You think, this child will never know about that rain at Fushimi Inari and the 40 minutes and the sketch and the man who said the lines were honest. They'll know a father who sat by a koi pond and went still with the specific stillness of a man receiving something he doesn't know how to hold yet, but intends to. The baby is a girl. He holds her in the hospital with both hands, carefully, the way he holds things he has decided matter completely. She is small and furious, and has his jaw and your eyes. He looks at her, and says nothing. Then he says, very quietly in Japanese, "She is the first completely good thing I have made." You cry, which surprises you, because you are not generally a crier. He does not notice because he is entirely focused on the small furious person in his hands. They name her Riko. After nobody. After themselves. And here is where the story becomes something even you did not predict. Because Riko arrives, and with her arrives the question you have been able to not ask for 3 years. The question you set in the hallway, at the gate with the 2 men. The question about the rooms you've never entered, and the things you've chosen not to know, and the difference, as Hamiko said, between what he does and who he is. Because now there is a third person. And the third person cannot consent to the geometry she was born into. You paint a picture of Riko sleeping in her first week. It is the most honest painting you have ever made. Technically, it is a baby sleeping. Actually, it is a question. What have you brought her into? You don't finish the painting for 6 months. Tekashi does not ask why. He comes to the studio one evening when Riko is 3 months old and sits beside you and looks at the unfinished canvas and says, "What does it need?" You say, "I don't know yet." He says, "What are you waiting to know?" And you say the thing you have not said. What happens to her if something happens to you? He does not answer immediately. He looks at the painting for a long time. The unfinished painting of the sleeping baby. Then he says, "I've been thinking about this since before she was born." He tells you, there are arrangements. Money, accounts, properties outside Japan, legal structures you have been a part of without being fully informed. Your American citizenship is the anchor. If anything happens, you and Riko can leave. There is a path. He built it before he needed to because that is how he operates. He says, "I have spent my life building something. I do not want her to inherit it." You say, "Then what does she inherit?" He says, "You, and the paintings, and whatever she decides to become." You sit in the studio for a very long time after this. Then you finish the painting. Riko is 2 years old when the conversation happens. You have been thinking about it for 6 months, and you sit down across from him at the kitchen table and you say, "I want to talk about the future." He closes his newspaper. You say, "Not tomorrow. 5 years. 10. He says, "Go on." You say, "I need to know if there is an exit. Not emergency. Not crisis. A planned, structured, real exit. A version of this life where she grows up somewhere the geometry is smaller." He looks at you. He is quiet for a long time. The quiet of a man for whom this question is not a surprise. He has been carrying his version of it, but who is being asked to say it out loud by someone with every right to ask. He says, "Yes." He says, 3 years. There are transitions that cannot be rushed, and I will not rush them because men who leave badly end worse. But there's a plan. There has been a plan. You say, "Portland." He almost smiles. He says, "You hate Portland." You almost laugh. You say, "Somewhere with good light." He says, "There is a property in Kamakura, on the coast. The light there is what you said about the painting. It arrives and leaves without apology." You say, "You've been planning Kamakura." He says, "I've been planning a life where I am not what I am." It takes longer than the life took to build. You look at him across the kitchen table in the house in Higashiyama that is beautiful and cold and yours and strange and real, and you think about the rain at Fushimi and Neri in the sketch, and the man who said, "You paint what you see, not what you remember." And you think about Rico in the next room, asleep, furious even in sleep, inheriting something from both of you that hasn't been named yet. You say, 3 years. He says, 3 years. It is not a promise. It is not a contract. It is two people who have built something real out of something dangerous agreeing that the next thing they build will be built somewhere quieter. You reach across the table. You put your hand over his. The scar is under your palm. You leave your hand there. The house is quiet. The two men are at the gate. Rico is asleep. The koi in the pond move through black water. The mountain is somewhere outside in the dark, patient as mountains are, changing color at a rate nobody is fast enough to catch, but everyone who pays attention can see. You came to Japan to find yourself. You didn't find yourself. You found something harder and better. You found a man who looked at your paintings like they were worth understanding. You found a life that required more courage than anything you planned. You found work, real work, the work that matters, in the space between what things are and what they appear to be. You're still painting that space. The canvas is not finished. It won't be for a long time. And the light in Japan keeps arriving and leaving without apology. That's the thing about light this precise. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. It just keeps coming. And you either pick up the brush or you don't. You always pick up the brush.